Hello, and welcome back to Thinking Out Loud with Scott and Mark. Today, we're going to talk about application performance monitoring. If you're following our video series, this is kind of the second major topic. And this one is one that we're using a lot lately with clients. So we'll just give you a quick intro. APM, as it's generally referred to, is kind of the next generation of stuff that came after monitoring. And there's also this other term called observability, which we tack on to modern APM tools, which are really modern monitoring tools. So kind of keep those three things in mind. Monitoring became APM, and added to that was observability. If you're wondering why we use these things, these are our investigation tools that we use when we've got an application problem and we want to start diving into it. So Scott, I don't know if you wanted to give.
Well, let's start with the definition of what would you say the definition of observability is? Because I think that's the differentiator when we're talking about the latest kind of iteration of what we're dealing with. So really quick, what would you say the definition of observability is in the context of this?
Yeah, I go to a really practical place for this. It has to do with how much you have to instrument your code. So if you have to drop tons of hooks into your code in all kinds of places, and then you have to update those potentially over time, that's bad. That is, I think, typically not scalable. It's not practical for most clients. So observability, in my definition, means things that auto-instrument or auto-discover what's happening in your environment without having
I would agree with that. Definitely. I would add to that maybe, surely you're dropping it in your environments. Often you and I are usually looking at Kubernetes or OpenShift, container-based environments. You drop it in. We're working a lot with Instana. That's part of why we're segmenting into this conversation. Let's talk a bit about Instana in particular, but the space as a whole. But certainly we've been playing a lot with Instana lately. You drop it in, right? You look at the endpoints, and I think the critical bit that I find the most interesting and the most time-saving element of this, not only is it able to save you the time, because I remember back in the day, I don't know if it was probably 15 years ago, when we used to have to go to the build solution and instrument this code as it went out so that you'd have the hooks in there to make this stuff work. That's gone away. But I think the other piece of this equation is around the analytics side. So what are you doing with that observability over time, right? Before, you had to hook in and lay down a system and you had to tell it what is a problem in your space, right? So if you hit this length of time or this condition, alert me, because that's not normal. It's defining the baselines by running it over time, which I think is the most progressive win with these tool space. And the analytics, the AI ops behind this is saying, hey, once you sit outside of those norms, let me know, right? And it'll alert you right away. And in my mind, that's the big win, because I can't tell you how long you used to spend trying to define those thresholds and those alerts. Now let the system do it for you. Anyway, I find that to be the most compelling part of this.
Yeah, indeed. And I'll add to that, since you brought up what's the baseline, observability figures out what's actually happening in the system. And the bane of my existence for years was we would make static drawings about how something is supposed to happen, or even CMDB databases that define the application inventory of where things sit. And those things inevitably get out of date. They're when you go to actually solve a problem, the first thing you do is throw them out the window. And that is not okay. Like it's the best, I guess, that as an industry we could do at the time, but it wasn't okay. If you compare it to the way that APM tools work today, they really, not only do they define a baseline, they define, at least in the case of the tools we're working with, they define an actual picture of what's calling what, not just what some architecture diagram said was supposed to happen, but what is actually happening in the system, either right now or at some specific time slice.
Yeah, it's funny. You should, we were talking this the other day about, the powwows that would come about when there was a problem. And I remember some of these calls where you'd have like a dozen some odd people on the call, and because it's, something happened, shit, excuse my language, stuff's down. And so you get everybody you could think of on the call, networking guy, the database guy, and then you're sitting there batting around for hours trying to figure out where it lands. Now you can be more strategic, right? You were just commenting on this, and I'm just piggybacking on something we had outside the context of this call. But you know, you don't need to invite all those guys. You're already down to the code level and saying, oh, here we are, right? This is where the problem is. It is database related. It is the way that it's being called. So let's get the guys that are sitting behind this bit of Java code on the development team. Let's get the database guy, and let's forget about the rest of the guys, right? So the ability to come to resolution is dramatically sped up, you know, by virtue of dropping in a tool like this. So.
Yeah, it got so bad with that, this whole thing about blaming the network or the database or the groups that manage those, that the last couple times I've had to lead one of these Festivus parties, I would just show up and stand in front of the room right away and say, we all know it's either the database or the network, so we could just go home now. It's just every single time.
That's like, have you tried turning it off and on again kind of answer, right?
Yeah, yeah. I just do it to take it off the table right away, because that's not going to be an acceptable answer. Like, you know, and 99% of the time you go there and it's like, maybe you could add a database index or add some memory, and maybe it would make it 1% faster, but that's not really where the problem is. Yep. So anyway, hopefully we've given you a good introduction to why we care about this, and we'll pick it up again in future videos with some more examples and hopefully some more depth on why you might care about it.